This video was produced by OOWK Media. Proof that aliens created mankind exists in ancient biblical texts. During the past few decades, thousands of ancient Sumerian texts and cuneiforms have been discovered in ancient Mesopotamia, which we know as modern-day Iraq. These translations by respected scholars and scientists throughout the world have revealed an incredibly detailed scientific account of the biblical story of creation. It's not at all what they were expecting. In the 1960s, author Erich von Däniken presented the radical premise that the gods and angels reported in their stories of the Bible were actually ancient astronauts who had been misidentified. New archaeological discoveries are being made and presented that not only strengthen this premise, they have presented new evidence that provide the most incredible answers to many of mankind's deepest questions. Questions like, who am I? Where do I come from? And why am I here? And this time, the collective wave of information brings with it scholars, scientists, and archaeologists bearing strangely convincing proof. We were first told the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, came directly from God during the period beginning about 1300 BC to 300 BC. Therefore, it began about 3,300 years ago and was completed about 1,000 years later. Next, we learned the Greek Bible was plagiarized from the Hebrew Bible, and then came the discovery that the Hebrew Bible was plagiarized from the Sumerian Bible. Sumerian was the first written language known to have ever existed. Whoever the translators of the later Bibles were, they certainly left out an incredible amount of very important information. And as amazing as the translations seem, even now they somehow begin to make both logical and scientific sense. The Book of Genesis and the Hebrew Bible were based on the Sumerian story of creation. For at least 2,000 years, Hebrew numerologists and scientists of the Kabbalah have been searching the Old Testament for God's grand code. An original manuscript of a rare Kabbalistic text, the Sefer Yetzirah, is also known as the Book of Creation. It's the oldest book in the Hebrew occult tradition. It describes how God created the universe and all living things using the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. It was recently discovered that the 22 letters represent the 22 amino acids used as the building blocks of human DNA. The secret to the creation of mankind was DNA manipulation by the gods. How did the Sumerians know about human DNA over 5,000 years ago? Now, our accumulated volumes of knowledge are saying, in the most remarkable way, that these writings are scientifically based, authentic, and their content is provable. The Old Testament was based on Sumerian text and cuneiforms dating back from a period of 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. There are literally thousands of these recovered records still awaiting translation. They intricately tell us about everything relating to life during this time, from sales receipts and family matters to their story of creation. It's a story which clearly reveals that our modern-day Bible stories descended directly from these ancient texts, and there was much more that was left out of the Bible, stories that we were all taught. As remarkable as this seems, this is what it says. The Sumerian story of creation picks up over 4.5 billion years ago when the original Earth, Tiamat, collided with a great celestial body, Marduk, forming our moon. Today's scientists estimate that event to have occurred around 4.5 billion years ago. How could this have possibly been written 4,000 to 5,000 years ago? How did they know all of the planets in our solar system, including Marduk and Tiamat, and that their collision also resulted in the creation of Earth as we know it? The planetary giants struck each other at an angle, leaving all land mass on one side of the planet known as Pangaea, while leaving a huge gap on the other side with the oceans filling it in. Over hundreds of millions of years, Pangaea slowly split into the 7 continents we recognize today. This is exactly what today's scientists say happened. Again, how could this have been written 4 to 5 millennia in the past? Modern science didn't even know all of the planets in our solar system until about 100 years ago. The Sumerian story of creation includes descriptions of life on a planet in our solar system that we have yet to discover. Its name is Nibiru. It has an oval orbit that takes 3,600 years to travel around our Sun. About 500,000 years ago, the atmosphere on Nibiru was greatly damaged and diminished by a cataclysmic celestial disaster, and those who lived there had to find a way to repair it in order to survive. They knew that by putting enough gases and dust back into the atmosphere, this damage could be mended. The metal that by far worked the best for this purpose was gold, because no other substance can be pulverized into such a fine powder and make to stay aloft in the atmosphere. It's also inert and won't combine with any other substance. It's interesting to note that NASA launched a rocket in the early 1970s which was meant to search for extraterrestrial life. It included a gold disk which identified Earth and many of its features, including mankind. It is estimated that this gold disk has a lifespan of 2 billion to 4 billion years. Gold was extremely rare on Nibiru, but they had remarkable technology and were able to scan the solar system to find the presence of gold. They first found it in an asteroid belt and attempted to mine it there. They lost many astronauts and spaceships, and their efforts were a failure. The leader of the astronauts, Anu, again scanned the solar system for gold and got readings from Earth. He landed on our planet about 445,000 years ago. Their story about the trip to Earth is truly remarkable. The descriptions of seeing Earth up close for the first time are breathtaking. When they first see the details of Earth emerge from the darkness of space, they describe it as having a white top and white bottom with blue around the middle, clearly identifying the Arctic and Antarctica with the oceans around the temperature zone. The creation of mankind. The Sumerian story of creation states there was much gold on Earth, and the Anunnaki began to mine it from the ocean. But this was too slow. They realized that to get the great quantities they needed, they had to get gold from within the Earth. They brought 50 more astronauts from Nibiru to help with the mining efforts. They established a base on Mars to store gold awaiting shipment to Nibiru. The reason for this base was that the gravitational pull on Mars was significantly less than that on Earth. Shipping from Mars saved them much time and energy. How did these writings correctly identify that the gravitational force on Mars was much less than that of Earth? Those stationed on Mars hated working there and eventually rebelled. One of the alien rulers, Enki, decided to create a class of worker beings through DNA manipulation. He chose an existing species of hominids, which had the potential for success. They created a breeding area known as the Eden. This is where they created an entirely new species specifically designed for mining gold. They combined hominid DNA with their own DNA. The result was the being of mankind. DNA was first identified in the late 1860s by Swiss chemist Friedrich Miescher. How was DNA included in the Sumerian Bible thousands of years ago? The DNA creation was successful, but the new beings were hybrids, therefore sterile and unable to reproduce. After several failures, they were eventually successful, and the new breed was called the Adamu, the first humans. Their numbers multiplied rapidly. This is what the original Bible says. That's just a tiny part of their creation story. It was carved into stone nearly 5,000 years ago. How can all these words possibly be explained? It's impossible to deny the existence of these writings. They exist. They're authentic. They've been translated by numerous scholars, a task which has taken 3 decades, and this is what they clearly state. But it's clearly not what religions and governments necessarily want to hear. The Sumerian Bible even reveals the cause of the Great Flood. They explain that approximately 12,000 years ago, when their planet passed through our solar system, there was such a huge gravitational force exerted on Earth that it caused the ice shelf of Antarctica to collapse and slide into the ocean. How could they have even known there was an ice cap on Antarctica? They still thought the Earth was flat, or so we were taught. It was stated that the aliens, gods, the Anunnaki, did not cause this climatic event, but they could have prevented it. They chose not to intervene because by this time mankind was everywhere and out of control and in such disarray that they chose to let them perish and then to start anew. It was Enki, the doctor scientist, creator of humankind, who warned Zuzudra of the coming flood. Zuzudra was the man who was renamed Noah a few thousand years later. He was told that he and his entire family should collect DNA samples of all the various species of animals and plants to preserve them for life after the flood. A 6,000-year-old Sumerian seal accurately depicts all of the planets in our solar system. Modern science only discovered our complete solar system about 100 years ago. Is this too much information to digest? People have found religious doctrine to be immensely inefficient, lacking in credibility. They were interesting but nearly impossible to believe. Once you slowly began to digest and understand this new alien point of view, the Bible actually comes alive. This new knowledge explained so many things in the Bible, from Adam and Eve to Moses and the burning bush on the mountain to the virgin birth of Christ, which explains the heavenly origin of Jesus. When angels are presented as actual flesh and blood beings, the Watchers and gods, who are the Anunnaki rulers, the Nephilim, who defined by their technology and not their magic, an entirely new picture emerges. It's one of wonderment, hope, and inspiration. Archaeologists have now discovered the ruins of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. They are estimated to be the size of a modern city and will take another 30 years to fully excavate. Its age has been scientifically proven to be between 11,000 and 12,000 years old. The oldest human society ever discovered on Earth. Another 6,000 years older than the Sumerian Bible. It was built before the Great Flood and was meticulously buried in sand to be saved from the Great Flood by those who knew such an event was coming. And even though this society had no written language, they did have images carved in stone, and they had statues and symbols. These statues included carvings of what seemed to be the double helix, a representation of the DNA molecule. They also include statues of heads which have huge eyes, are somewhat triangular shaped, and eerily resemble the heads of creatures we have come to know as the Greys. They clearly express a story of the gods who came to Earth in spaceships and through DNA manipulation created mankind as a slave species to mine gold. It described their planet, and these gods were clearly shown to be the Anunnaki. And it is now believed that Göbekli Tepe was the Eden where they engineered the first humans, the Adamu. There is coming a time where the information that is taught in our schools will confirm and not contradict the body of proof thus far discovered by our scientific community. A new wave of spirituality will be awakened in mankind. It will be born from knowledge. It will be fueled by the hundreds of books that will soon be written about the newly discovered evidence. But this information changes everything. It's already out there. It's being published. It's already begun to spread. This time, truth will be provable and science, not religion, will be its teacher. You've been watching an OOWK media production. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please subscribe to our channel.